everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke.Academy. A day late this week. I was called into a lunch meeting yesterday, a bit unexpectedly, and yesterday, Wednesday at noon, I met with a great group of people that were only able to meet yesterday. Tried to shimmy some things around, but better late than never. It delayed one day. The general gist of this, just so you know, the recurring schedule and the calendar that I plan for us is every Wednesday at noon Eastern time. So every once in a while, some things will present themselves that will lead to us flexing that a little bit. Today is Thursday, noon Eastern time, and it is October 2nd. Yesterday started the beginning of what I have, for years, a group of us have kind of jokingly referred to, or actually an area of the marketplace that I work in, jokingly referred to as beauty pageant season. So I've been hard at work at all kinds of stuff relating to beauty pageant. And no, it's not the type of beauty pageant that you're thinking. It's actually a wildly inappropriate nickname that's given to, of all things, this sort of parade of examination that takes place typically the fourth quarter of every year, October, November, and December, the fourth quarter. Most companies that offer things like 401k plans go out and evaluate their service providers. And we call it a beauty pageant because horribly and in a very awful fashion, it tends to be sort of replacing one beauty logo with another, and it's all Wall Street based, etc. So anyway, I don't want to get into that. That's not actually the planned topic. But if you are curious about that, and actually I hope that you are, for your sake, I hope that you have access to a 401k plan or something like it at your workplace, that you are gainfully employed and enjoying whatever it is you do in life, and that you have a good 401k plan. That happens to be an area of expertise for me. That's where I've focused my career. I've done a lot of work in that arena, and I do a lot to expose and make people aware of potential issues. That's the whole thing behind the post that I did on beauty pageant, and then a big video that we'll release with the same title, Beauty Pageant, probably later today. I think the final editing is being done. But anyway, that's not actually the topic of today's program. A few things, a few housekeeping notes. I did get some people that contacted me because they listened to Steve Bannon's War Room, and apparently I came up yesterday on Bannon's War Room. That is in relation to something else that I do in the interest of fighting back for our great nation, for our constitutional republic. And that has everything to do with something called precinct strategy. Dan Schultz and I, this is unrelated to UnWoke, but it is part of where I spend some of my free time. Haha, as if I have free time. But Dan Schultz and I run X Spaces. That's a component of the social media platform X, formerly Twitter, where we talk a lot about something called precinct strategy. So that came up. There was a big special on it a few days ago that it's anticipated around 20 million people will watch. I have a segment in that. And then yesterday, in reviewing it and recapping it for Steve Bannon, I came up. So as soon as my name to Dan said, Jonathan Broadbent from Ohio, yeah, that's me. And Dan and I are friends. And we've been doing that for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. Dan's been at it for, I think, around 16 years. So I'm kind of the rookie in that field. But 2+ years, Dan and I have been on X Spaces. If that's something that you're interested in, again, this is unrelated to UnWoke, but it's important. And for me, it's important enough that I dedicate 2 big blocks of time. Again, I'm in Ohio, we're Eastern time zone, so I'm going to give you things in Eastern time. But Tuesday afternoons at 2 p.m. Eastern and Friday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern on X, Dan and I go live and talk about this stuff. That's why it came up on Bannon's War Room yesterday. They were recapping a big national expose on the thing that, again, I'm surprised by the numbers, but apparently 20 million-ish people watched that, which is good. More people need to be aware of this stuff, just like UnWoke.Academy. We are now somewhere between 22 and 23 million views. I haven't aggregated in a while, but it's not enough. I need to keep pushing. I need to keep doing this. And the reason that I want to do this and open this conversation once a week is so that we can maintain a dialogue. And forgive me, I'm going to sort of wax philosophical for a moment here, but I'm going to put people in two general categories. There are the people who know the people that know how to think, and the people that like to be told what to think. Everything that I do and everything that I'm focused on at UnWoke.Academy, and the research that we do and encouraging people and the PMA that came out of it is for people who want to think for themselves, who value self-determination and the freedom and the generally speaking, better results that come from us knowing what to do and how to do it. That relates to a lot of things in life. I keep drawing the analogies, but they keep holding true. If you think about education and the people who've fallen into that trap of feeling that if they only put their kids on that yellow bus for 12 plus years, that they'll get these great, wonderful, educated, well-adapted young people back again. And that keeps proving not to be the case. And then they think if I spend lots of money on college and send them away, they will be dutifully, properly educated and prepared for life. And that keeps proving not to be the case. Same thing with medicine and healthcare. We keep thinking that if we trust the doctors in lab coats who are connected to big pharma, that we'll get healthier. That's not the case. It's really people that take it upon themselves to gain at least some understanding of an aspect of life, and that's education. And for some people, that leads to home education. And hoorah, great. If you can pull that off, that's awesome. Generally speaking, those young adults end up much better off than their government-run school counterparts. And in similar fashion, some people take it upon themselves to learn about I almost said education again, different analogy, to learn about nutrition, diet, exercise, and don't rely so heavily on big pharma and the people in the white lab coats and going into the mega hospital. And generally speaking, it's my observation that those people end up healthier. In very similar fashion, you're in this conversation so that we can talk about your understanding of what happens at globalist mega bank and Wall Street, big finance. I'll just wrap it all up in a big bundle and call it all big finance. Because big finance, when we lift the hood and look at what's happening, we end up with, again, running through that sort of gamut, less educated children when we give them over to the education industrial complex. We end up less healthy when we put our faith in mega hospital and big pharma. I think that's provable, very easily provable when you look at the health results of average American citizens compared to most other nations. We spend way more and we get way less. And in a very similar way, Wall Street functions to enrich itself. And a lot of us look at the unfunded liability. And that is actually something that I cover in that beauty pageant episode that I just I just recorded it. It's not edited. It will drop later today. And the post, I did a long form post about it. You can find that on Substack. Just look for beauty pageant. I think it was just yesterday that published, or 2 days ago. Excuse me. We have to do a better job as a people of self care, and that includes understanding the world of finance. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about what it means when we say, or when we hear people say, MAGA or America First, or sometimes you hear people say freedom economy. And raise your hand if you think those are good things. I do. I think they're wonderful. I'm absolutely all for it. Make America great again. Make America first. We are a sovereign nation that should have borders, and we should be interested in creating a better life and future for the next generation of American citizens. Many in our country, unfortunately, are not interested in that. And unfortunately, many in our country, including many politicians, have adopted the interests of other countries ahead of our own, like opening the borders, etc. But if you believe in MAGA, and if you believe that a freedom economy is a good thing, you believe in America first, we have to fund it. There's actually, give me a second here. I actually like how I put it. I'm going to look up, I don't normally do this. I'm going to look up a quote post that I did. Yep, I'm getting feedback from myself. I'm on a loop. We can't have that. Oh, it's because I'm live and I opened Substack. That makes sense. But here, 1 second here. How beauty pageants can save the world and why they're not actually so beautiful. So in this post, if you look it up on Substack, here's my quote. I kind of thought about this, and I find a great way to put it into context. I think what I'll end up doing is making this a note or just stick it up on my monitor or something. But what I've come up with is an important thing to consider. Ultimately, there's one unavoidable financial truth. What we fund today will become the future the next generation inherits. I'm going to say that again because I think that that is a critical thing that not enough people understand. Ultimately, there is one unavoidable financial truth. What we fund today will become the future the next generation inherits. You can find that and its context on Substack.com. So when people say MAGA and America First and freedom economy, what they're ultimately should understand is that by going out and spending and investing our money in the right things, we can create that. We can decide to fund new small business enterprise. We can decide to fund American enterprise and ingenuity and create the next new things that shape our economy in the future. We can decide to do that. And that all goes back to that adage we've been saying at UnWoke.Academy for years now, which I actually have my wife to thank for. She came up with this. Dis the globalist left. That stands for know where you donate, invest, and spend your money. If we don't take that to heart, if we walk around and just sort of put this veneer on our objective and say MAGA, America First, and freedom economy, but then we shop at all the wrong places that are doing all the ESG, DEI stuff, and we invest our money in ways via 401k and IRA, et cetera, that rewards bad actors, the companies that went woke, then we've created the opposite of what you see all over social media. You see that go woke, go broke mantra. And I happen to like it. And I hope that it proves true. But what if the opposite proves true? What if those woke companies end up vastly richer and are successful at crushing American business? So far, it's happening. It happened. It was breathtaking, lightning speed with COVID. The number of restaurants and small businesses that were individually, privately owned that shuttered is breathtaking. During the years of the COVID fear, the number of those companies that closed is awful. And according to traditional American values, we would think that they should reopen. COVID's done. That's gone. It's behind us. And hopefully, this is a side note, but it's an important one because one that I care a lot about. Hopefully, we do the right things to block it from ever happening again. Here in Ohio, we actually have a group. I know I'm way out on a limb on a tangent here, but it's important. You should look up wherever you are and learn about Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom, OAMF, they go by for short. The group that run that, the head of it is a woman by the name of Stephanie Stock, who is absolutely feared in our state capital of Columbus because she is a bird dog and an absolute advocate for medical freedom. Her objective is to put legislation in place to stop that sort of thing from happening again. Heaven forbid that it does, because more small business enterprise, more privately owned, free economy sorts of things would be forced to collapse. That's one of the things that happened. We saw it, and a lot of us comment on it. We saw that, why was it during COVID that certain types of businesses were A-OK, and you could go there and shop and buy their stuff, but other types of businesses were saddled with crushing, debilitating expense in order to stay in business, and many of them couldn't maintain that, and they folded. Well, let's put that into context and understand what that represents. If I'm right, and that was by intent, you have the migration of massive capital and business and revenue into a very small number of companies. And ultimately, many of those companies have gone extremely woke and seem to continue to go even more woke. And everyone's talking right now, and it's a little bit distracting, but it's a representative example about whatever the guy's name is that's supposed to headline the Super Bowl halftime show now. I'd never heard of him prior to a couple of days ago, but what I'm learning is horrifying. And yet the NFL is making the decision to do that. NFL, for any non-football fans, American football, it stands for the National Football League. It's the American professional football. Most of it is under the NFL. But in the case of the NFL, if we just continue to support them and they continue to make money, they don't care what social media says. And they don't care that a lot of us post that we find that objectionable. They will only care if their pocketbook is hit. They will only care if they make less money. So there are some people that are trying to organize and say, let's form, and there are all kinds of different answers I've heard. Some people are suggesting not watching it. That'll probably be me. Some people are saying you can watch the football game, but don't watch the beginning part where they're going to try to split us and do two different national anthems. Again, maybe. I don't even know if they're still doing that. That was horrible when they were. And maybe some of them are going to kneel and spread all the spurious allegations that our police force are all racist and targeting Black people, which was horrible and destructive and damaging. But if they do that, let me finish that train of thought. They're going to say that maybe they'll create an alternative to watch somewhere else on another channel or stream online that's an alternative to watching the halftime show. All of that's fine. But at the end of the day, if the people that own and make money off of the NFL get rich, and worst case, if they make more money that day than they would have with an entertainer that wasn't controversial, like I don't even remember what his name is, whatever the guy is that wears dresses. I think he's a Hispanic guy. If they end up rewarded for doing that, and if we, the people, never really get off of neutral and stop just simply complaining on social media, and we never actually create some alternative or go elsewhere or make them feel the impact, then we've lost. In a very similar way, when it comes to all these other companies that we're investing in, we should be paying a lot more attention to where our money goes, because we're funding the future that the next generation will inherit. We're building it right now, whether we like it or not, or want to admit it or not. If you're constantly going through fast food chains and aren't pausing every once in a while to wonder what happened to that local restaurant, that mom and pop, the family that owned and ran that diner or Italian food place or whatever, gosh, whatever happened to them? If they're out of business, why not think about a better America where we put them back in business, where we open and fund them again? And that's just using food as an example. We can do it if we want to with everything: manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, textiles, all of the things that used to be made here. Pharmaceutical, for heaven's sakes, making pharmaceutical drugs in the United States again makes all the sense in the world. And it does a heck of a much better job of providing for the defense of our great nation. Even some of the supplies that our military relies on and requires is made overseas. Some of it's made in foreign competitor nations. Why? Why isn't it made here? Don't buy all the excuses of the labor is too expensive or the regulatory environment or whatever. We can change all of that. We can. It takes funding. So there's a little bit to unpack, but ultimately I want everybody to take away from this conversation that the next time you get your IRA or 401k statement, if you haven't yet, if you're watching this show, if you're following UnWoke.Academy, and you've seen the episodes where I show you how to lift the hood and see what your money is actually being invested in, two things. I'm going to offer you stick and carrot. These, the old adage. The stick is, I firmly believe that to a very, very large extent, the stuff that most rank and file Wall Street based money managers and investment managers like mutual funds have put most people in is inflated. That means bubble. I do believe that there is a bubble. I call it the globalist bubble. Too few companies got overfunded and it drove up an inflated bubble. If that isn't enough to persuade you to reconsider some or all of your investment strategy, then think about MAGA, freedom economy, make America great again, America first, those great slogans. If you think any of them, actually they're effectively one and the same. If you say that and believe in it, we need to fund it. So what's happened over the last few decades? I'm putting a few things together, but it's important to know this. I see a message that just popped up on Substack. By the way, we're live on Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook, and Substack. If any of this is unclear or you'd like clarification on it or any questions occur to you, feel free to post those. I will do my best to get answers if you cannot post where you are or you'd like to be sure that you stay anonymous, feel free to email at info@unwokeinvesting.com. Info@unwokeinvesting.com. Anyway, finishing that train of thought. And again, on Substack, if you are posting something related to this topic, please repost that. It didn't stay up on my screen long enough, which I think may be a setting. I'll check that after this program. I want to be as responsive as possible. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. If what I was saying is I'm going to put things in perspective. The first thing to know is that capital markets, and that's stock investing, the design of it, the intention of it is for we, the people, to play the bank. We get to be the bank and own parts of great companies that hopefully flourish and become profitable, and we participate in that. And that's just a win-win situation. We're giving some capital to businesses that need it. Hopefully, that's the way it should be. We're giving capital to startup enterprise and all kinds of different industry and mid and large companies that need more capital to continue to grow and flourish. And they may need more additional monies to fund research and development or the acquisition of another company. And that's the way that free market is designed to work. During the Obama administration, I believe it was something a little north of 800 local community banks closed. Regulatory environment ended up sort of crushing many of them, and they closed down, which is driving banking, which is another typical avenue for business enterprise to get some money through business loans. That's all but evaporated. It's very, very difficult for small business venture. And again, by that, I'm using the term more generously than typical. I mean a lot of different types and sizes and scale of business where they might be able to go in the past to a local community bank and borrow. Now they're left with fewer and fewer options. And many of the mega banks are now much more globalist in their stance and posture, which makes them harder to get money to fund new business, enterprise, etc. Well, that should be where we come in. So all the things that we get excited about or could potentially lead to exciting businesses of the future, they have to go somewhere for money. If they can't go to local community banks, maybe what they could eventually do is go public, list themselves, and then ask we the people to help fund them. But if we're not there, if we don't hear the call, if we give all our money to mutual funds that don't seem to appreciate the tried and true historical practice of going out there and looking for those good companies and funding them and taking some chances and investing in things that are not globalist, they'll never get funded, and we won't end up with MAGA. We won't end up with America First. Freedom economy will have just been a pipe dream. I'm one of those people that's very, very encouraged by what I'm seeing. It's not enough yet, but we do see a lot of the capital markets moving out of the last 5-year trajectory of virtually all money being piled into very few companies. So again, I'm scanning the comments here. If any of part of this, as I said, is unclear, I know I'm kind of unpacking a lot and I'm going fairly quickly, but if you think correctly in terms of banks and capital markets, which means the stock market being very similar in their intention and purpose, then you're on the right track. But what if all of the banking ended up being done exclusively for, call it 30-ish companies. That's sort of what's happened over the last 5 years in capital markets. You've got about 30-ish companies that have received so much funding, and I've already touched on this. I call it the globalist bubble. Hold on, let me decline that message. I call it the globalist bubble, and I think that it would have continued were it not for Donald Trump getting back in office and taking a very different stance on capital markets and our economy. He's pushing the economy in a very different direction, and he's nudging and encouraging us back into a freedom economy, into make America great again. And I want to put that, what that means, in a different, maybe more resonant historical context. If you like America's middle class came from free market economy. It was the ability of people in America to come up with a concept, build a business, grow and flourish that, and derive meaningful, self-sustaining income for them and their families without having to go and ask permission, without having to go and beg and plead at megacorp. It could come up with concepts and engineer and create new things. All of the stuff that we hear about, all the stories of great American enterprise, it started that way. And back in the day, there were lots of regional community banks that would help concepts get off the ground. If that whole infrastructure is gone, where does the money come from to make America great again? Well, as I started to say, I'm hopeful because really good things are starting to play out in the capital markets. As I've said several times, on February 21st, Trump issued the America First investment policy. Investment policy statements, for anybody who doesn't know, they factor in very heavily in my world, in the world of finance, because they give instructions on how finance is to work, how capital markets and how the funding apparatus in business enterprise is to function. They give all kinds of instructions. If you're not familiar with that, go back. I did actually a couple of episodes. I released a few episodes on the America First policy statement issued by Donald Trump on February 21st. I'll give you a little bit more context and detail on that. But since then, or actually starting before then, because people saw what was starting to happen during Trump's campaign in 2024 and started to get some hope again, things started to shift in capital markets. And then they accelerated when Trump was actually elected. If you've been listening to my comments about the woman we've been tracking who joined the financial PMA, and again, that's just somebody utilizing the research that we've done into finding the not woke stuff, into reverse engineering and getting out of all the ESG, DEI nonsense that has corrupted financial markets. She utilized that research, and I actually helped her do some trades on October 8th last year, 2024. So we're actually just shy, we're 6 days shy of 1 year. Coming up on a 1 year anniversary, her return on that investment is just over 60%. That is, to me, a crystal clear indication that we're on the right track. And frankly, based on all of the companies that we're tracking and looking at that are kind of the opposite of that globalist cabal of companies that were getting overfunded for a long period of time, most of them are doing really well. And What I suggest that this means is a not even once in a lifetime, once in several generation opportunity to invest in where the markets are headed. The markets are headed out of the that little clique of globalists. And frankly, I do continue to suggest that these have to come down. I think that globalist bubble will probably have to pop. And I don't think that it's going to be slow and gradual. I candidly think it will probably be permitted to pop around mid 2026 because that would have the most political impact. I suggest that what's likely to happen is that those, what we refer to as the markets, which is indexes, I'm getting to that next, those will be permitted. Pardon me. Let me take a sip of water. I believe that those will be permitted to collapse and tank mid 2026 because then politically, that I think can be hung on Trump and the Republicans. And what they'll talk about is they'll try to make best use of that in order to get more of the policies and politicians back who were leading into that consolidation of markets, that global communism, or whatever you want to call it. The mission is to get as many people out of that as possible. So there's that stick and carrot. And I've touched on it before that there's a fork in the road. You can either believe America first, MAGA, freedom economy, and invest appropriately and give critical, much needed funding to those enterprises. Or you can play hands off and give money to Wall Street, who has no interest in that. Wall Street, broadly, generally speaking, they don't have an interest in small new startups and free market and the best company wins with the best competition and research and development and all that. It is so much easier to make huge, big money by simply putting that green veneer on a few companies and then just give them all the money so that they become this, they how do I want to put it? It's easier not to have to actually do the research and go out and investigate and report on and make educated, informed bets on the good versus the bad if you can create an artificial fake universe where you determine what's good and what's bad. That's what happened. That's the reason those small number of companies got overfunded, because they did a really good job of putting a veneer on their company. They're the ones that checked all the boxes, that they had a diverse board of the right number of Asian, Hispanic, white, transgender, bi, LGBTQ, whatever. And they had their sustainable green energy plan in place. And they had a diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory training to train racism into the employees, whatever, all those boxes. And so if you work in finance and you have the choice of funding a huge staff to go out and research and figure out what the right investments are and examine all those different companies and figure out and then track them over time if they're and see if they're continuing to do the right things or the wrong things, and when to get your money in and when to get your money out. As an investor, you should insist on that. But what you've been getting as an investor for a long period of time now is Wall Street working with politicians and companies to put this veneer and say, effectively, everybody's money should be in these 30-ish companies because they all check the boxes for being social justice, for lack of a better general blanket term. I think that the writing's on the wall. I've read the tea leaves correctly, I believe, and that whole sham is collapsing. When it collapses is a matter of debate. I think mid-2026 for the reasons that I mentioned. While it's collapsing, other great companies that have been cash starved because capital markets have been dysfunctional because of the agenda of global communism, they're now getting money. And with that lifeblood of capital, they're growing and flourishing. I hope that that continues. It will continue if we want it to, if we let it. If enough of us have this conversation and talk seriously and look at ourselves seriously at what we're investing in, that means opening up your statement. Look at it. Ask questions. If you have a financial advisor, ask these questions. And you can, even before you go in to ask questions about whether or not they're in line with your beliefs, you can go online and do a tremendous amount of research for free. I've covered that in prior episodes. Things like how to look up your mutual fund. Hint, if you have the name or the ticker symbol for that mutual fund, you can use any browser to get a wealth of information. I've actually done video walkthroughs using a tool called Morningstar.com. That's free and publicly available. There is a paywall thing, but you don't have to pay to get everything that you need. It's in the free part. You can use the free part of Morningstar.com to extract information and find out about the mutual funds that you own and what you're funding. That's the key. Last piece, and then we're going to sign off. Indexing. So lots of people starting years ago were conned into going into mutual funds and giving over all their voting rights and the decision making about where to invest and when and how to mutual funds. If I had a magic wand and a time machine and could go back, I would convince people that's not a good choice. For a long time, it seemed like it might be because there was economy, sort of. It used to be, back when mutual funds came into the scene, that working with a stockbroker personally to build a portfolio that you could know and see and understand was a little on the expensive side because stock trades were pretty pricey. Well, flash forward to now, and stock trades are practically free. I think in some instances they sort of are. That's a topic for a different conversation, but figure $5 a trade. If you can build any sane, rational, reasonable person is not doing frequent trading. They're just building a portfolio of companies they know, like, and trust and can feel good about, and they do very little trading. Every once in a while, you put a little money in, you buy a few things. $5 a trade. It's unreasonably inexpensive. Well, now the tables have turned where it's actually, I believe in most cases, more expensive to pay the fees to the mutual fund, they have all these internal costs, and then they embed their trading costs. You're still paying the trading costs. You're just paying it in aggregate with lots of other people. But done the right way, you can build your own portfolio, and that's based on all the research we're doing, just like that woman I talked about, with returns of over 60%. You should be able to reduce your cost of ownership significantly. It got worse in the world of mutual funds when we shifted again from managed mutual funds, or at least there was somebody somewhere that was making some decisions. And hopefully they were making good decisions. And you could argue that at certain periods of time for certain decades, they were. But then we shifted again to index mutual funds, which is basically just an algorithm that is tracking some index. The index right now is, how do I want to put this? This is a little bit complex. Bear with me a second here. We're going to work through this. There are several different indexes, actually many of them all over the world. But in the US, typically speaking, when we hear people on the news, the talking heads, and people in finance on financial shows talking about the index and whether the index is up or down. And when you talk about index investing, which is it takes many different forms, it's usually, let's just call it the S&P 500. That's the most typically used. The S&P 500 is exactly the things that you don't want to be investing in if you're America First, MAGA, freedom economy. So if you are investing based upon that index, you are exactly the opposite of MAGA, America First, and freedom economy. I think that's the simplest way to put it. Sorry, it took me a minute to kind of get there with the terminology I wanted to use and how to express that. If you are basing your investments on S&P 500 and hoping that that investment does well, then you are hoping that a very small number of overfunded companies get more funded. That's another way of putting it. That's awful stuff. So you can't be both. It's kind of like people who balked at the jab and then also put all of their faith in big pharma. Those are, what's the expression? What's the term? Anathema? Those are complete polar opposites. So if you are indexing somewhere, maybe try and find your way out of it. If you are, let me clarify that. If you're indexing, the first thing to look at is which index. Some of them may not be bad, but generally speaking, and I continue to track this, I've talked about it again and again based on the emails that I get as a financial professional. Still, to this day, many of the index-based annuities, index funds, the what are called buffered ETFs, etc., most of the ones that are publicly typically talked about, at least in the US, and focused on, are based on the S&P 500. So all of that stuff is continuing to try to pitch that sales gimmick that we've just argued, I believe I've successfully just argued, is fraudulent, wrong, bad, harmful, damaging, and the opposite of Make America Great Again and America First. So don't invest in it. Hopefully this makes sense, and hopefully you're inspired wherever you are and however you're doing your investing to go unwoke. Diss the globalist left. Know where you donate, invest, and spend your money. If there are any questions that occur to you later, don't forget to send your questions to info@UnWoke.Investing.com. info@UnWoke.Investing.com. For now, I'm going to sign off. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you back again Wednesday at noon next week. Take care.